Pastor Horton. Welcome to this week's interview where we're joined by Mr. Larry Brant. It's such an honor to have you on.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. It's my honor, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked a little bit before, and before anything else, I would love if you wouldn't mind giving your testimony again. That way we can kind of get to know who you are.
Sure. Um, I came to Christ at a young age. I was 7, raised in a Christian home. And when I was 7, I just simply went to my folks and said, "Can you tell me a little bit more about what it means to be saved?" And so my parents were great. They talked to me in a way that I could understand. And at that point, I accepted Christ as my Savior, was baptized, joined the church, started growing in my faith. Um, and then as time went on, uh, I grew up in just outside of St. Louis, a little town called Cahokia near East St. Louis. Went to college, uh, married my college sweetheart, and went off to seminary and got a Master of Church Music degree from Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the way you say it. No Louis here. Uh, and then for the next 25 years, I was an associate pastor in various churches doing music and youth, music and education, music. And that line at the bottom says, and anything else the pastor needs you to do.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. And then in my final church, which was Southview Baptist Church in Lincoln, Nebraska, which if anybody from there is watching, we miss you guys and love you guys. Thank you for all the support you've given us over the years. Uh, while I was there, I was asked to also become a police and fire chaplain for the city of Lincoln. And with the permission of the senior pastor, I did that, and I absolutely loved the ministry. The police officers, the firefighters, the staff, ministering with them, but also ministering to the victims of violence and disaster. Being able to make a difference in their lives was huge, and I think God used that to begin to transition me to full-time military chaplaincy. So. Uh, a little story about how I was called to military chaplaincy. I found out that my denomination was having a chaplaincy training in Hawaii at the exact week that my wife had off from school because she worked for the Lincoln Public School System. So I went, honey, it's absolutely of God that we go to this now since you have the week off. So we went and we renewed our vows while we were there.
Oh.
But while we were there, I began to, and going to the training conference and everything, I began to really feel this call that God was calling me out of the local church and into military chaplaincy. And kind of like Moses at the burning bush, I tried to tell God all of the reasons why he was wrong, you know. And as God did as God does, and he countered every argument. I would say, well, first of all, God, I'm already too old to join. The next session, they talk about how the Army and the Navy are giving out these age waivers. Then I said, well, God, I don't have the right degree. Literally, the next section, they're talking about these new online accredited seminaries, which I realize now are everywhere, but back then not so much. This was in mid 2000s,
Oh, yeah.
and then finally, I thought, okay, I've got God on this one, and I said, God, I'm a big boy. At that point, I weighed over 300 pounds, and God came back with there's this thing called a diet, and so I was like, okay, God, I yield to your will, but I really need you to tell my wife I'm really too scared to do that. So at the end of that day, we're walking back to the hotel, we're walking back to our room. And in those movies where the hallways just seem to extend out, that walk back to the room seemed to get longer and longer and longer. And then we get to the room and I close the door and I turn around and my wife literally points her finger in my face and says, I think God's calling you to be a military chaplain. And I was like, he really did tell her, you
Well,
know. And so for the next 2 years, um, I went back to school, got my Master of Divinity, um, had the support of my senior chaplain, which I really appreciate. Aaron, you're awesome. Um, and began working to lose. And in about a year and a half, I lost about 110 pounds.
wow.
Um, and then joined the Navy at 45. And about a year after I joined, maybe a hair over a year, um, I was with a Marine Infantry Battalion in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, in a very kinetic environment. Um, you know, helping Marines deal with things that nobody that age should have to deal with, killing other people.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes that's what you have to do um, to protect our country. And so over the next 16 years, and there was some interesting situations for me. Got into a few firefights, and you have to understand the chaplain doesn't have a weapon other than the Bible.
Yeah.
So you step on that battlefield, it was my assistant, my religious program specialist, and the Marines that kept me safe. The my weapons were the Bible and prayer. Uh, and uh, there were some dicey days, to be blunt. Uh,
Oh
but
yeah.
but God brought us back home, most of us. And then over the next 16 years, I've had the privilege to just work with wonderful people in the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard. Um, and then came COVID. And I was actually going back to school, courtesy of the Navy during COVID. I was getting 4 units of clinical pastoral education, which is what you have to have in order to be able to work in a hospital setting. So during COVID, I did two residencies. I did a residency with the VA in San Diego, and I did a residency with Naval Hospital San Diego. And there, I was in the ICU. I was the ICU chaplain at the height of COVID, and just watching so many people pass. And sometimes I would watch 1 month a wife pass, and a month or two later, her husband pass, and then ministering to the family in that crisis,
Yeah.
and also ministering to the healthcare providers because they just when it came to that they just felt so helpless. Not that they didn't try; they were very valiant in their efforts. And then I went over to the VA and did my residency with the VA. And I was very privileged to work in a PTSD domiciliary called the Aspire Center, and which I personally think needs to be replicated in every city the VA has a medical center in.
Yeah.
Um, but what they did was they took homeless people off the streets of San Diego, homeless veterans, I should say, and helped them get clean, help them stay clean by addressing their PTSD and moral injury. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. And then help them find a job and help them find housing. And they have about an 85% success rate. They are just phenomenal. And I love it that in with that, the chaplain has an equal voice at the table. He's not just, he or she is not just somebody put over to the side. When they have a meeting about how to address the needs of a patient, the chaplain is at the table and they are expected to contribute. And I loved how they did that. They are just awesome. And as we did that, as we worked with them, and then I went on to my next assignment, which is at Naval Hospital 29 Palms. I thought to myself, why are we waiting until these people are homeless on the streets of San Diego to try to address this? And so um, I jokingly say I ripped off the VA. Truth is, the people who invented the program willingly gave it to me and said, tweak it as you need to see fit. And that was Timothy Essett and Irene Harris, who are amazing people. Uh, and so we took a program that worked well with the VA and tweaked it toward active duty and began using it with great success. And it was through addressing PTSD and moral injury through the spiritual side, and not forcing someone to believe something that they didn't want to believe, but maybe reconnecting to the faith of their childhood, or connecting to a new faith, or something else.
Yeah.
But it went really well. Um, and we were blessed with that. And I partnered with a mental health provider, and we would work together so that we addressed the clinical and the spiritual at the same time, um, working with these folks. And it was just amazing. And
Yeah.
then further on, I started working on my doctorate, as every good minister is supposed to. My wife said, "Why don't you work on your doctorate?" I just graduated from this program. I don't want to go back to school. Uh, but but I did, and I did. I went to Midwestern Baptist Seminary in Kansas City, which is wonderful. And I realized that with moral injury, most people know what PTSD is.
Hmm.
PTSD is traumatic in nature, something that happens to us. We were more than likely afraid for our life. It traumatized us, and we're having trouble getting over it. But not many people know what moral injury is. And moral injury is kind of the opposite side of the coin. That's where we do something, fail to do something to prevent, or maybe are ordered to do something at the direction by someone in authority over us, to do something that so goes against our morals, our ethics, our spiritual beliefs, that it emotionally and spiritually breaks us. If you
Yeah.
think not all of the examples of military, but this is a military example. If you think about the Marine in Iraq who sees a woman with a suicide vest, notices that she's pregnant, and she's walking toward the gate that he's guarding, and he has to make a decision. Do I protect myself? Do I protect my fellow Marines? Or do I hesitate and not shoot the person if she won't stop? And then they end up having to kill the woman, and by so killing the unborn child. And then that Marine is struggling with that. Even though it was the least worst decision, it still wasn't a good one because
Yeah.
he had to take a life.
The lesser of two evils.
Yes, and they struggle with that, to the point that maybe years later they feel like they're infected. And so with that so-called infection, they back off from their faith, they back off from their friends, they back off with their family. They're afraid to infect their family with whatever they think they have. And they think at this point, there's they'll talk about forgiveness, but they don't think that it applies to them because they're worse than what God can forgive.
Yeah.
Um, and so many pastors, um, many average people, if you're not, in the VA system, if you're not military, first responder, medical, you may not realize what this is. And so I wanted to try to do something that helped educate folks. So my doctoral project was on educating local pastors, local civilian chaplains on what moral injury is, how there is hope for restoration, and how they can develop a pastoral response to it.
Yeah.
And that went really well. I was very pleased with how that went. I'd be happy to send you my dissertation. That and 10 cups of coffee will keep you up at night.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
but then uh, a lot of folks suggested that I that I take that dissertation and turn it into a book. And so that's what I've done. And we can talk about the book towards the end, but I just want to spread the message that with PTSD and with moral injury, there's hope for restoration.
Yes.
You don't, you don't have to feel like how you are now is how you always have to be.
Yeah. So, um, funny you should mention, but we are running short on time.
Sorry.
But I do want to say if we walk away with nothing else to whoever's listening, there's a fun science fact that I always like to think of when it comes to helping somebody with trauma or moral injury or something like that, which is all of the cells in our body regenerate or replace each other every 7 years, give or take. Which means when you've gone through a traumatic experience, I have experience with this, within 7 years of that happening, it no longer happened to my body. It happened to my old body.
Hmm.
But I am no longer that clump of cells. I'm now a completely new clump of cells. It's
You're a
the
new
body of
pig.
Theseus. So I really like thinking of that and that our faith is the same way. You know, we can do terrible, terrible things, whether we see it that way or God sees it that way, but through grace and mercy, God forgives us.
Mhm,
And that doesn't take 7 years, but He forgives us and we are born again.
mhm. Very, very true.
Now, before we run out of time, your book, let's talk about it. Where can we find it? What's it called?
Okay. The book is called Restoring the Broken, and I do have a website for it. It is restoring-the-broken.com. Or you can look it up on Amazon. It will be releasing on February 3rd. So on February 3rd, you can get the Kindle version for 99 cents.
Ooh,
Yeah, you can't go wrong there. Uh,
no.
99 cents. Then on February 4th, it'll go back to the normal price, and then you can also order the paperback and hardback versions. Um, but and in there, I've got a little bit. This is the copy of it here. This is my preview copy right there, and it's "Restoring the Broken: A Ministry Leader's Guide to Understanding and Healing Moral Injury." And basically, what I did, what I explained to you earlier, was I took that dissertation, but I took all of the academic words, all of the huge long sentences that we have to do for academics and just put it in plain simple language because I wanted pastors, I wanted church members, I wanted the everyday person to just read through this and say, I get it, and there's something I can do about this.
Yeah,
And because this is something that not many people in the church really understand, but they should, and they need to understand how it affects the people suffering from it, how it affects the congregation and the families as well.
absolutely. I know that I'll be getting a copy of that. To everybody else who's listening, I will have links to that and to the website in the description of wherever you happen to have found this. Mr. Brant, thank you so, so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for the invitation. I was honored to be on your show.
To everybody else, I hope that this has inspired you. Please feel free to share this message with anybody. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and God bless.